The room was carved from obsidian and lit by floating orbs of bioluminescence. 14 beings sat around a crystalline table, each from a different star system, each considered brilliant, cold, and precise, and each baffled beyond reason. "Play the footage again," grumbled high strategist Vornak, tapping his four-clawed fingers in rhythm on the edge of the table. The orb in the center shimmered to life, projecting the moment in question. A human woman, short, broad-shouldered, hair like scorched hay, stood outside a smoking wreck of a convenience store, cradling a coffee in one hand, a shotgun in the other. Alien ships streaked through the sky behind her. Smoke curled around a burning pickup truck. And still, she sipped her drink. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She tilted her head, spat tobacco juice, and muttered something the audio translated as, "If y'all knock out my Wi-Fi again, I swear to God." Vornak paused the projection. "Explain this." Dr. Zorlak adjusted his robes, his antennae twitching in intellectual distress. "We have identified the subject as Karen Daniels, age 49, former elementary school secretary, two-time chili cook-off champion, widowed, resides in," he squinted at the report, "what humans call Nebraska, a territory that is flat, windy, and emotionally barren." "And yet she remained," hissed Admiral Chark, "while our plasma missiles rained down." "She didn't just remain," Zorlak muttered. "She reorganized the neighborhood watch into a militia, armed them with farm tools, propane tanks, and crockpots." "She used kitchenware?" General Haldren asked in disbelief. "She made bombs out of them," Zorlak replied, "and snacks, which she fed to her troops, mid-combat." The table fell silent. "We've crushed worlds," said Vornak softly, "burned moons, but we cannot make a single Midwestern woman feel fear." Zorlak cleared his throat. "Hence, Operation, why is Karen unbothered?" The room nodded. The mission was approved. They arrived in Earth orbit cloaked, quiet, and bristling with analysis drones. Zorlak led the mission personally. His academic reputation was on the line. His assistant Glim, a pinkish, squid-shaped youth obsessed with human media, floated beside him, holding 6 datapads and humming the Golden Girls theme. "Cut that noise," Zorlak snapped. "It soothes the mind," Glim said. "You ever notice how their humor is based on passive aggression? I believe that's key to their psychological structure." Zorlak ignored him. His eyes, pale and lidless, focused on the screen. There she was, Karen Daniels, human subject 0, wearing what she called capri pants, and yelling at a group of teenagers spray painting an abandoned school. "What's she saying?" Zorlak asked. Glim translated. "She's threatening to call their mothers and revoke snack privileges." "And they obey her?" Glim zoomed in. "Sir, they're cleaning the wall." In one day, Karen managed to repair 2 broken hydrants, shame 3 alien scout drones out of hiding, and convince a gang of looters to mow her lawn or feel the wrath of God and Homeowners Association. Zorlak watched, puzzled. "We scanned for neural enhancements, trauma suppressants, psionic implants," he murmured. "Nothing. She's biologically average. Slight cholesterol imbalance. Some bone erosion. Nothing to explain her resistance." "Permission to initiate contact," Glim chirped. Zorlak hesitated. "We must be cautious. This species twists meanings. Their language is laced with misdirection. I still don't understand what 'as if' means." "Simulated indifference," Glim offered. "Absurd. How can one pretend not to care with such passion?" Nevertheless, the order went through. They would pose as human government scientists, blending in through voice filters and holographic projection, and request an interview under the guise of a routine resilience survey. The doorbell camera caught them first. Karen opened the door in a World's Okayest Mom t-shirt and stared at the 2 shimmering, slightly twitching humanoids. "You Jehovah's Witnesses or salesmen?" Zorlak, voice carefully modulated, replied. "We are researchers, studying conflict coping mechanisms in rural civilian populations." Karen raised an eyebrow. "You mean why I didn't pee myself when y'all blew up my town?" There was a pause. "Essentially, yes." She snorted. "Come on in. Chili's on." Inside, the house was aggressively normal. Cross-stitch slogans framed the hallway. A plaque read, "In this house, we don't hide crazy. We parade it on the porch and give it sweet tea." Karen poured them drinks. The liquid was thick, brown, and smelled faintly of cinnamon and despair. "This is sweet tea?" Zorlak asked, sniffing. Karen narrowed her eyes. "You insulting my tea?" "No," Zorlak said quickly. "Merely analyzing." She sat. Her chair creaked. The room quieted. "You want to know why I'm not scared of your little space war?" she said, hands clasped over her belly. "Let me tell you something, mister." Zorlak leaned forward. "I've raised 3 kids. 2 boys, 1 girl. All under the same roof. During puberty. You think a laser cannon scares me? Try a teenage boy who's mad you took his Xbox. Try explaining algebra to a girl with TikTok brain who thinks the mitochondria is a YouTuber. I've worked double shifts, nursed my husband through cancer, buried him with my own hands, and still made it to choir practice. Fear." She scoffed. "Fear's a luxury. I'm too tired for fear." Zorlak blinked slowly. "You experience constant stress and yet function?" Karen's voice turned sharp. "We're women. We adapt. You think it's bravery? It's burnout with lipstick. It's knowing no cavalry's coming. So we become the cavalry." Silence stretched. Even Glim, usually bubbling with trivia, sat frozen. Karen stood. "Now, if y'all don't mind, I got brownies in the oven and church ladies coming in 20. Zorlak rose, stunned. "One last question." She paused at the kitchen door. "Why do you help others, even at risk to yourself?" Karen looked back. For a moment, her face softened. Lines of grief etched her eyes. "Because we've all lost something. Might as well keep each other standing till the storm passes." Zorlak watched her go. The scent of baked chocolate lingered in the air. Back in orbit, the debrief was complicated. "She fed you?" Vornak asked flatly. Zorlak nodded. "Yes. Multiple courses, including something called casserole. It is both comfort and combustion." "Did she threaten you?" "No. She just mothered us, and in doing so, rendered us intellectually defenseless." "You mean she emotionally disarmed you?" Admiral Chark said dryly. Zorlak sighed. "Precisely." Glim piped up, voice still shaken. "She made me a to-go plate. It had bacon. I don't even eat solids." There was a long pause. "She is not an anomaly," Zorlak continued. "We've surveyed over 100 human females in rural war zones. All exhibit similar behaviors. They weaponize kindness. They organize chaos. They prepare meals mid-battle. One woman gave birth during a firefight and apologized for the mess." "That's horrifying," whispered Vornak. "That's humanity," Zorlak said. "And they're spreading." Karen isn't leading an army. She's planting a mindset. And it's taking root. On the planetary surface, somewhere in Utah, an alien patrol vehicle was buried in yarn and bingo cards. Grandmothers with rolling pins had declared a no-fly zone. The data confirmed a rising trend. Human women were not just enduring the war, they were redefining it. Zorlak stared out the viewport at the blue-green planet below. A species that laughed during annihilation. That found humor in horror. That brewed tea in the ruins and dared the stars to stop them. "We came to study them," he murmured. "And?" Vornak asked. "We've started fearing them." He tapped the comm. "Send a warning to all command fleets. Begin evacuation from Earth sectors D through K." Evacuation. Admiral Chark frowned. "We still hold the upper hand." Zorlak's eyes narrowed. "Not anymore. They're teaching each other. Sharing casseroles and courage. They're not afraid because they know what matters." "And what is that?" Glim asked quietly. Zorlak's voice dropped. "Each other." He turned. "And no war can beat that." The screen went dark. In the silence that followed, someone whispered the phrase that had haunted every report, every transmission, every failed invasion. "Karen is coming." And this time they believed it. The Galactic Empire, shaken but not shattered, responded in the way all bureaucracies did, with overconfidence and PowerPoint. The High Council convened a subcommittee on human-female containment, chaired by Admiral Chark and co-sponsored by the Department of Non-Lethal Subjugation and the Ministry of Aesthetic Distraction. Our mistake, Chark declared, stabbing at a slide labeled behavioral pacification via domestic simulation, was trying to confront them with military force. This time, we neutralize them with what they love: comfort, routine, scented candles. What are scented candles? Asked General Haldren. Chemical lures. They emit nostalgia. A hush of impressed murmurs followed. The plan, dubbed Feminine Containment Protocols, was simple: recreate an Earth luxury resort behind containment fields. Hostile subjects would be invited under the guise of trauma recovery. There would be yoga. There would be mood lighting. There would be nonstop playlists of Kenny G. And in the center of this synthetic paradise, Karen Daniels. She accepted the invitation with a look that made Zorlak's core temperature drop. Sure, she'd said, brushing flour from her apron. Could use a vacation. Glim, now her unofficial translator and devout casserole worshiper, protested. Sir, she's not tricked. She's humoring us. She's entering a prison, Chark snapped. She has no power. Karen stepped into the complex, wearing cargo shorts, Crocs, and the serene expression of a woman already bored. She surveyed the faux spa with raised brows. The decor was pleasant, neutral colors, ambient music, replicators offering herbal teas. But there were no children, no chaos, no to-do list with coffee stains. I see what this is, she muttered, crossing her arms. It's a fancy waiting room. With robes. Within the hour, she'd assessed the weak points in the energy field, rerouted the thermal vents to overheat the security node, and taught 2 of the alien guards to play Uno. One wept when she called him sweetie. By day 3, she'd installed a suggestion box, redistributed food rations to the women with kids, and repurposed the spa's aromatherapy oils into a form of napalm. She called it essential vengeance. The Empire had underestimated her again, not because they thought she was weak, but because they thought she was idle. They'd failed to understand a fundamental truth. Human women don't relax in danger. They organize. Karen assembled her unit from the other guests, a mix of Midwestern grandmas, 2 no-nonsense librarians, a Navajo elder named Rose who spoke softly and carried a switchblade, and Velma Jenkins, a Southern Sunday school teacher with biceps and a deep hatred of nonsense. They wore robes like armor, wielded loofahs like maces, and turned the spa's meditation chamber into a war council. Their rallying cry, bless your heart. Velma took charge of supply chains. Every towel became a sling. Rose modified the masseuse drones to administer stun jolts. Karen managed morale and tactics, giving orders while folding laundry and offering life advice with unnerving precision. Zorlak observed in disbelief. They're coordinating. Glim whispered, they've started meal planning. Impossible. The resistance made its move at 0400, under cover of herbal steam. The women emerged in formation, robes cinched, faces painted in facial mask clay. The guard post fell in 6 minutes. One alien tried to retreat, only to be taken down by a well-aimed slipper. They didn't just escape, they took over the facility. Karen held court in the jacuzzi, now filled with alien officers tied with silk belts and given chamomile tea for soothing reflection. Admiral Chark, red-eyed and humiliated, tried to retake the complex by force. He was met at the door by a chorus of women singing Jolene and a barrage of cookies. Why cookies? Chark demanded, disoriented. They're diplomatic payloads, Zorlak muttered. High caloric value. Emotional resonance. Unassailable. A standoff ensued. The Empire deployed sonic disruptors. Karen countered with a bake sale. The proceeds funded a satellite hijack that broadcast their resistance across 10 systems. Human media framed the event as the Spa Revolt. Galactic tabloids dubbed them the Sisterhood of Strategic Serenity. The real shift came when Lieutenant Varix, a young alien officer assigned to the Spa's perimeter, defected. Not because he believed in their cause, but because Karen taught him how to make French toast and told him he wasn't useless. No one had ever said that to him before. Zorlak watched the footage of Varix, now wearing an apron that read, "Don't make me use my mom voice," building water filtration systems for the prisoners. "This isn't rebellion," Glim whispered. "It's community." "They're rewriting the rules," Zorlak murmured. With casseroles. The Empire panicked. More containment zones were created. Each failed. One in Kansas was repurposed into a quilting club that produced battle flags. Another in Sweden became a tactical think tank disguised as a knitting circle. Karen's movement had no official name, no centralized command, but it spread like wildfire across battlefronts. Human women turned occupied towns into strongholds through PDA meetings and backyard barbecues. They weren't fearless. They were tired, and that made them unpredictable. Zorlak filed a new report. Human female behavior remains anomalous. Attempts to pacify result in insurgency. Recommend strategic withdrawal, or possibly enroll in their programs for survival and better snickerdoodles. But the council refused. They doubled down. And Karen? Karen built a library in the ruins of a holding cell. She named it after her mother. She taught alien defectors how to make lemon bars. She offered sanctuary to a rogue diplomat who just wanted to play cards in peace. And one day, while stirring a pot of chili too spicy for any known species, she looked to the sky and said, "If they want to send more, let 'em come. I'll set another plate." Below her, Rose sharpened a butter knife. Velma hung laundry shaped like warning flags. The women baked, taught, and armed themselves all at once. The Empire had triggered something ancient, something patient, something maternal, and it would not be tamed. It began, of all things, with a daytime talk show. The Galactic Empire, desperate to regain control of the narrative spiraling beyond them, greenlit an interstellar broadcast intended to present the human insurgency as a rational, sentimental chaos. They chose their stage carefully. Interstellar Real Talk with Varnock, the highest-rated nonviolent visual forum in 12 sectors, hosted by a reptilian empath with 3 hearts and a fondness for thermal cardigans. The plan was to bring Karen Daniels onto the show. Let her talk. Let her joke. Let her unravel. The Empire believed that under scrutiny, her leadership would look erratic, unstrategic, more PDA president than war architect. Zorlak didn't support it. Neither did Glim. But the council had spoken. Karen arrived wearing a denim jacket with buttons that read "Bake the Resistance," and Midwest is best. Her hair was in a loose bun. She looked well rested. That unsettled the producers more than anything. Varnock welcomed her with rehearsed warmth and folded claws. "Karen Daniels," he said smoothly, "you are known as a folk hero, insurgent, and chili enthusiast. What drives you?" Karen smiled without showing teeth. "Love, mostly." The crowd chuckled. So did Varnock. He leaned forward. "Love? In war?" She crossed one leg over the other. "You're thinking romantic, aren't you?" "Nah. I mean love of community, of place, of people who'll drive 3 hours to fix your porch because they heard you had a rough week." Varnock nodded. "But surely fear, surely rage, is what propels rebellion, not casseroles and care." Karen tilted her head. "You ever been a mom in a grocery store with a screaming toddler and no backup?" The studio went quiet. "Fear is normal," she continued. "But if you stop every time you're scared, nothing gets done. So we move. We keep going. And if we cry, we stir the soup while we do it." The translator software hesitated before resuming. Emotional nuance slowed its circuits. Varnock blinked all 6 eyelids. "You're saying resilience is a product of ordinary hardship?" "I'm saying we've trained for this without knowing it. Late nights, medical bills, empty gas tanks, kids with the flu and a busted furnace. You think we learned strategy from war colleges? Try Black Friday lines at 5 a.m. The audience stirred, alien ambassadors, viewers across galaxies watching via neural link. And they didn't laugh, because they understood struggle. But they'd never seen it wrapped in humor and grit like this. "And the violence?" Varnock asked softly. "How do you justify it?" Karen's face changed, not cold, but heavy. "I don't. I just accept it. You folks invaded, burned our cities, took our children. We adapted. War isn't noble. It's survival, with a crock pot and a bad back. She looked into the camera, and across the empire, beings stopped what they were doing. None of us wanted this. But we'll finish it. And when we do, we'll plant tomatoes where your weapons once stood. Varnock swallowed. His scales flushed pale. Do you hate us? He whispered. Karen paused. No. No. I pity you. The silence after that statement was a gravitational field all its own. She stood. The producers scrambled, but she raised one hand calmly. I brought something. From her bag, she pulled a Tupperware container and offered it to Varnock. He opened it. Inside soft, spiced, homemade cornbread. He stared at it like it was a bomb. Karen leaned in. Try it. Don't worry. I left out the jalapenos. He hesitated, then took a bite. There were no weapons in that moment. No empires or protocols. Just food. Just history. Just a warmth he hadn't felt since his own planetary winter ritual, long before the Empire conscripted him into quiet cruelty. He broke down on live broadcast. Karen patted his clawed hand. We all carry grief. I'm just used to mine. The feed didn't cut. The Empire wanted to shut it down, but public interest surged. Alien viewers demanded the full interview. Memes spawned instantly. Fan art depicted Varnock and Karen as unlikely best friends. Rebel factions played the segment before every mission. Karen Daniels became more than an insurgent. She became a cultural phenomenon. Back on the cruiser, Zorlak reviewed the transmission in stunned silence. She disarmed them with a story and bread. Glim sniffled softly, and she got a standing ovation in 7 languages. Reports flooded in. In the mining colonies of Epsilon 12, female workers organized around community kitchens, naming their movement the Ladle Line. On a rogue moon near Sector F, exiled scholars drafted a manifesto inspired by Karen's interview, blending tactical analysis with pie recipes. Civilian ships began broadcasting her quotes as deflection codes. But most disturbing to the Council, alien defectors tripled in 24 hours. Entire squadrons requested reassignment to civic reintegration under human mentorship. A planetary governor wrote, I'd rather learn casserole logistics than die for numbers. In response, the Empire issued a counter-broadcast. It featured heavily edited footage of Karen, manipulated to make her seem unstable. But by then, trust had shifted. People had tasted cornbread, and they remembered. The Empire tried again, this time, sending a special envoy to interrogate Karen directly. He vanished. Days later, he resurfaced, wearing an apron and describing something called Sunday brunch. Even Varnock changed. He began ending each episode with a recipe and a phrase that swept across galactic social media. Strength isn't loud. Sometimes it just brings you soup. Karen, meanwhile, didn't claim victory. She returned to Nebraska, rebuilt a library, and started a mentorship program for alien youth struggling with loyalty and loneliness. Her base grew, not through fear, but through comfort and coffee. She did not call herself a general. She called herself a neighbor. And perhaps that, above all, was what frightened the Empire. Because how do you fight someone who doesn't want your land, just wants you to feel safe enough to sit down and eat? Glim drafted a new thesis. Emotional dominance as strategic supremacy. The Midwestern matriarch model. Zorlak approved it. We misunderstood them, he told the Council. We thought strength was about firepower. But it's also casseroles and calm voices in chaos. They don't conquer like us. They endure. They infect. And we are catching it. The Council dismissed him. But they couldn't ignore the change. Soldiers requesting kindness training. Youths quoting Karen in defiance. Peace protests waving flags stitched from kitchen rags. The Empire wasn't broken in battle. It cracked during an interview. And Karen? She just kept living, teaching, building. One night, she sat by a fire with Velma and Rose, sipping weak coffee and watching the stars. They're gonna keep coming, Velma said. Karen nodded. And we'll keep feeding them. Until they're too full to fight. Rose smiled. Or until they realized they were just hungry for for something else all along. And from the shadows beyond, others watched, silent, awed, afraid, and somewhere deep in alien hearts, hopeful. Because sometimes the most dangerous weapon is a woman with a story and a skillet. The peace talks were scheduled for 0900 sharp local Earth time, though Karen arrived at 8:37 with a casserole in one hand and a fire extinguisher in the other, just in case. She wore denim overalls, dusty boots, and a cardigan lined with hidden Kevlar pads. Her hair was tied back, her face unreadable, not hardened, just done. The location had been chosen by the Empire, a reconstructed IKEA on neutral ground. It had been selected for its sterile neutrality and natural deterrent to long-term engagement. No one could survive its labyrinth for more than 3 hours without losing sanity or hope. Karen strode through the automatic doors with a quiet purpose, followed by Velma, still wearing her Sunday pearls, and Rose, calm as always, a multi-tool strapped to her hip and prayer beads wound around her wrist like coiled steel. Inside, the air was dry and artificially citrus-scented. The furniture around the central table was minimalist, angular, and deeply uncomfortable. At the far end, the Empire's delegation stood tall and glinting, Admiral Chark Vornak, and 2 other officials who looked like sentient forks dipped in oil. Zorlak was there, too, but not seated with them. He stood beside the back wall, watching the proceedings with the expression of someone who had once tried to stop an avalanche with polite memos. Karen put her casserole dish down with a hard clink on the table. Brought something hot. Figured y'all might be tired of freeze-dried nonsense. Admiral Chark curled his mandibles. Is this how humans begin negotiations? Karen pulled out a chair and sat, crossing her arms. No. Normally we bring a fruit tray. But we're fresh out of time and patience, so this is what you get. Silence ticked by like a loaded chamber. Velma leaned against a shelf labeled Hemnes and muttered, "So help me if they try and sell us furniture instructions instead of a treaty." Rose placed a folded paper on the table. It was their proposed peace terms. Simple, clear, and drawn in bullet points that included things like stop abducting children, return stolen soil samples, and quit shooting at the damn moon. Vornak picked it up and frowned. You expect the Empire to agree to these demands unconditionally? No, Karen said, reaching into her tote bag. That's why I brought a backup. She pulled out a small flamethrower, homemade and slightly glittery, the kind of device that shouldn't exist and yet absolutely did. She laid it on the table like a centerpiece. The aliens shifted, visibly nervous. You wouldn't dare, Chark snapped. I dare most days before breakfast, Karen replied evenly. I dare after carpool duty, after taxes, after burying neighbors I grew up with because someone on your side thought Kansas looked unclaimed. Zorlak stepped forward, trying to intercept. Karen, perhaps we can proceed without escalation. I'm not escalating, she said, voice calm as snowfall. I'm explaining. She stood, slowly, and walked to the far end of the room. She didn't raise her voice, didn't brandish the weapon. She simply placed her palms on the back of the chair across from Chark and looked him in the eye. You think war is your language, she said. But we've spoken it, too. Not through bombs or fleets. Through loss. Through carrying the weight and the babies and the grief that don't get medals or parades. She gestured to Velma and Rose, who stood silent, flanking her like saints with scars. You came here expecting warriors. You found women. But don't mistake the difference. Chark exhaled, hissing. You're not military. No, Karen said. We're worse. We're survivors. The room trembled, not from volume, but from stillness. Zorlak took a cautious step forward. Karen, what do you truly want? Karen didn't blink. Freedom. And a future. And not just for us. She pointed to the cameras in the ceiling, broadcasting the meeting live across the stars. For all those watching who've been told they're weak, soft, unfit for decisions because they bake instead of battle. Let them see what resolve looks like without armor. She turned back to the table. This isn't a treaty, she said, tapping the paper. It's a lifeline. Take it. Or watch your empire collapse, not from warheads, but from refusal. You're bleeding planets already. Not because we're winning, Because your own people are leaving. They've tasted what we build. Rose added softly, and they're hungry for more. Chark laughed, sharp and bitter. You believe casseroles and lullabies will topple 10,000 years of rule? No, Karen said. But they'll light the match. A pause. Then a sudden commotion at the doors. An officer rushed in, Empire insignia scorched and crooked, panting. Sector J9 defected. Entire fleet. They called themselves the Skillet Front. Chark's hands twitched. Lies. They posted it. Streaming now. With cornbread emojis. The room descended into chaos. Vornak tried to regain control. Chark shouted into a comlink. One delegate stormed out, tripping over a futon display labeled Torf. Karen sat again, calm amid the storm. Didn't come to threaten, she said. Came to warn. Zorlak looked at her, voice almost a whisper. What if they don't listen? Karen picked up her flamethrower and slung it over one shoulder like a purse. Then we cook hotter meals. The broadcast cut 15 minutes later, not from censorship, but from sheer overload. Galactic feeds melted under the weight of reactions. Messages poured in from systems long thought loyal. We heard her. We want change. We'll bring snacks. The IKEA treaty table was later turned into a museum exhibit. The flamethrower, a centerpiece under glass, was labeled negotiation tool, human variant. Chark was recalled. Vornak defected. Zorlak resigned and enrolled in a cross-species counseling program started by Karen herself. Glim became her communications officer, joyfully translating everything from sarcastic PDA minutes to revolutionary recipes. As for Karen, she went home, built a new town with her bare hands and borrowed blueprints. She named the streets after women who'd stood beside her, some alive, some lost. On one corner, she opened a small school and taught alien children how to plant vegetables, settle arguments, and survive anything with pie crust and purpose. Every year on the day of the IKEA talks, she hosted a potluck open to all species. No weapons, no armor, just food and stories and quiet music under the stars. And once when a child asked if she missed fighting, she smiled. Not the fighting, she said, but the fire that never leaves. Across the galaxy, those who'd tasted what she built carried it home. The Empire didn't fall in flames. It unraveled in kitchens, in laughter, in small acts of defiance too human to suppress. And Karen? She became a story mothers whispered and warriors respected. The woman who walked into talks with a casserole and a flamethrower, and left with the future. The Empire had sent ships. She sent recipes. And somehow, impossibly, she won.